Today on Excellent Living, Rachel Price on fighting the culture war and the definition of beauty that teen girls face every day.
All the magazines are promising perfection with our makeup, and you're going to look 10 pounds thinner with our clothes. And that's all of the message every one of them is sending is you need to look thinner, you need to be taller, your skin needs to be darker, you need this tan, your teeth need to be whiter, and your hair needs to be this style. And then you'll be perfect and everybody will love you. But only if you hit these standards. No one is teaching that beauty is in who God created you to be. And God made you beautiful.
One study revealed that 7 out of 10 teenage girls feel like they don't measure up. Many choose their wardrobes by emulating their favorite reality and YouTube stars, or by browsing the popular teen magazines. Today on Excellent Living, Cheryl Martin's guest is committed to redefining beauty in young women and helping girls find their true value and worth in knowing they are created in the image of God. Rachel Price is a wife, mother, and motivational speaker, and the founder of the organization Priceless Virtue. Rachel tells Cheryl what's behind her passion for reaching teen girls.
It's my own story of where I have come from and what I have been through and the hurt and rejection I felt and how God pulled me out of that. And it's a passion for me to keep other girls from making the same mistakes I made and having to go through the same hurts that I went through. So it's more about keeping other girls from making those mistakes, but bringing them into a life with Christ where they can know their true identity and worth and live a life of purpose.
So you struggled with your own sense of identity and self-esteem?
Absolutely. I grew up in a Christian home, so I knew about God. I had a relationship with God. But as a teenage girl, as most girls do, I began to struggle with a sense of who am I? How do I fit in? What is my place in this world? And growing up, I was very sheltered. I was very shy and reserved. And it was actually to the point at one time where my teachers had to call my parents in for a sort of intervention. And they'd say, Rachel, we call on her in class, and she comes up to the desk and whispers answers in our ears. Like, you need to start putting her in speech and drama, get her acting in debate, whatever you can do, she needs it. So they did, and sure enough, I overcame it. But as I did, I began realizing that I was getting noticed. I was no longer that shy girl in the corner that nobody wanted to talk to. I was developing a face. Suddenly people knew who I was. And as I did that, I struggled for how am I going to fit in? And I would see the women on the red carpet, and they were tall and beautiful, and they had the perfect tan and the perfect hair. And everybody wanted, guys wanted to get pictures of them just to prove they'd seen them, and girls wanted to look like them. And so that's what I decided I'd fashion myself after. And in doing so, a modeling agency found me, and I got involved with them, following their promises of, wonderful things. And it was in that time that I began placing my value in my clothing.
What did your parents think about the path of modeling? Were they supportive?
Well, as parents, obviously they said that they would support everything I would do, but I had a full ride to Baylor Med School. And so obviously they were less than enthusiastic about my choice. And, obviously that wasn't a path that they encouraged me to go down in any way. And they tried to bring me back towards, Rachel, this isn't what you need to be doing. This isn't what God has for you. We love you and we're going to encourage you. And, they even helped pay for the modeling school. But it wasn't something that they wanted for me, per se.
And what took place during this time when you started modeling? How did your concept about you and who Rachel was change?
I began putting my identity into my clothing and my body. I found that when I'd put on a bikini and some body oil, suddenly everyone wanted my picture. Everybody wanted to know who I was. It was as if I morphed into that red carpet goddess that I dreamed so often of becoming. And I instantly thought, wow, this is great. I'm finally getting the attention I want. That was the secret. That's the secret to success.
But did you realize before then that you were longing to be noticed and you wanted attention?
I never really noticed that need. I kind of refer to the need for food. When we're hungry, we know we're hungry. When you're thirsty, you don't go grab pretzels, you grab some water or a drink. It's because you know you have the need and you know how to identify it. In this case, I didn't recognize the need, or I didn't know that there was that need there, so I didn't know how to fulfill it. And so instead, I was filling my thirst with pretzels, so to speak. And that need I was feeling for love, I thought was being fulfilled by all these guys who were suddenly looking at me and hitting on me and making me feel like I was important and special, even though I really had no idea what their true motives were.
And your clothes were sending a particular message to these guys, because how were you dressing then, or how did you begin to dress?
It was quite provocative. And, the shorter skirts, and it seems like the more attention I got, the shorter the skirts would get. And, the lower the neckline of the shirts would get, because the more and more attention I got. And it never occurred to me at that time that I was hurting these men or boys, I guess young gentlemen at the time. Well, gentlemen is saying it loosely, I guess. But it never occurred to me that I was hurting them or causing them to stumble, because whether they're Christian or not, it's still, looking at it now, I know that that's still my goal needs to be to dress to where I don't cause them to stumble. And at the time, I didn't realize that. At the time, to me, it just felt like, wow, they're noticing me. I must be special.
And also, not only are they noticing me, they want me.
Exactly. It made me feel like I was special, like I was worth something. But then after I would have these people talking to me and then I go home alone, suddenly where's my worth? So during the day when I'm all dressed up and people want me, I feel important. But then you go home and you wipe the makeup off and you get into pajamas and you go to bed alone and you're empty again. And there's no void that has been filled at that point. So it just kind of caused me to sink more and more into depression, because I still felt lonely, but only when I dressed up was I important.
To what extent do you think this is a struggle for this generation of young ladies?
This is I'd almost say that almost every girl has this struggle in some way or another, and some to a higher degree than others. But when you look around at magazines today, that's all you're seeing. All the magazines are promising perfection with our makeup, and you're going to look 10 pounds thinner with our clothes. And that's all of the message every one of them is sending is, you need to look thinner, you need to be taller, your skin needs to be darker, you need this tan, your teeth need to be whiter, and your hair needs to be this style. And then you'll be perfect and everybody will love you. But only if you hit these standards. No one is teaching that beauty is in who God created you to be. And God made you beautiful, and He sees you as that. But no one teaches that. So girls today are, especially when they look in these magazines, it's causing them to start cutting themselves or turning to alcohol or other self-abusive behaviors, because they're hurting because they can't reach the standard of perfection that the world is selling.
Are you finding that this trend is occurring with even younger girls, that it's getting younger and younger?
Absolutely. I've had girls as young as 8 years old, even, that I'm seeing are coming to me and saying, I'm overweight, I can't take it, and they're already suffering from eating disorders. At 8 years old, starving themselves because they don't look like that girl in the magazine, or they don't look like the girl on Nickelodeon, or the shows that they're watching, they don't look like that, and they don't have those kind of friends. So there's something about them that's not good enough.
Do you think they talk to their peers about this, or is this just an internal conversation that they're having?
A lot of times, they don't even realize they're having it. There are some times when I've overheard them talking to girls and saying, I just can't take it, I don't fit in. But then at other times, you see them struggling with it. You see them trying on different clothes, and you can almost see the internal conflict in them by the way they're acting out. But you don't actually know if they're even aware they have that.
Just like you weren't initially.
I was not at all. And looking back on it now, it's very clear. But at the time, all I saw was it was this action causes this response. And that's all I caught. I never knew why I was doing what I was doing.
What brought about the change? When did the light bulb go off for you?
Sadly, it took several years. Date rape and physical and verbal, emotional abuse, all of that was a factor. And I had begun staying with a very sweet woman who to this day is my hero. And everyone else around me would judge me. I'd gone, and I was dressing bad. It was my fault. I'd even gone to church with little booty shorts and high heels on, thinking
Almost
that's
like
okay.
Daisy Dukes?
Very, very much so, yes.
Wow.
Tube top, very inappropriate for church. But they'd asked me to leave. They didn't want me in there just like that. They walked me to my car and asked me to
Before
go
you
home.
heard the message?
Before I barely got past the front doors. I'd walked in and they almost instantly escorted me back out.
How did that make you feel?
I was very hurt. Because to me, my clothes were my identity. So they rejected me personally when they rejected my clothing. And to me, that was them saying, you're not good enough to be here. We don't want you. And they kicked me out. So what is the first thing I do? I go back to the mall to go shopping, to get more clothes just like what I'm wearing. And turn back to that.
A rebel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just kind of pushed me further into that. Because the world accepted me. Why couldn't the church? So I was like, you know what? If that's how they're going to be, I just won't go to church anymore. And I'd lost a lot of friends at that point, made a lot of bad decisions. And so I'd begun staying with a very sweet lady that I'd only met a couple times, but she took me in. And I noticed as I was staying with her, I'd get up in the morning and I'd come out with some other outfit that was still inappropriate on. And she would just look at me and so sweetly, reach out and touch my arm and say, Rachel, you are so beautiful, sweetheart. I'm just afraid people aren't going to see it with that outfit. They're going to be looking at the wrong thing. And she'd say sweet things like that every single day. Never judged me, just loved me. And she really, truly reached out with the love of Christ that I'd never seen displayed in that way by anyone. And that's what touched my heart, was her just loving me for who God saw in me. And God showed her something in me that He'd still created.
So she was stressing, you are a beautiful young lady, but it's not based on you showing your skin, basically, and dressing provocatively.
Absolutely. She made me feel special for who God made me to be, not because of my clothes.
And are you finding that's the message that this generation of young girls needs to hear?
Oh, they so need to hear that. Just that God made you special, and He truly loves you for who you are. He has a divine purpose for you, a very specific plan that only you can fulfill. And He wants you on this earth for that reason. And in His eyes, you're His daughter. You're perfect. He loves you. And we need to know that. We need to know that we're loved no matter what. And it's not based on our hair. It's not based on our size, our clothes, or anything else that we can say or do.
But what do you say to a young girl, whether she's a preteen or teenager? She hears that message, but she still looks to the left and to the right of her. And let's say she does have a weight problem, or she isn't as pretty as a girl, naturally beautiful physically, as the girl to her left or to her right. How can she get past that attitude of feeling less than?
Absolutely. That's one of the hardest questions that I get asked to this day. And in all honesty, I think that's a thing that we all struggle with. And the problem I find there is no matter how thin you get, there's going to be someone skinnier. And no matter how white your teeth get, someone's going to have better teeth. And no matter how thick you get your hair, someone's going to have thicker hair. So you can't ever set a standard for yourself based on what someone else looks like. You've got to learn to set boundaries in your life for knowing that this is what beauty is. It's not my hair color, it's not my hair length, it's not my size, it's not my clothes. And really encourage them to start focusing on other areas that they can find beautiful. What are things that you find beautiful? You find a laugh beautiful. That a joyful spirit is beautiful. Things that can bring you joy. And find beauty in those things and recognize where God has given you those strengths. And focus on that beauty that God has given you.
That was Rachel Price, the founder of Priceless Virtue, an organization instilling godly confidence in today's young woman. You're listening to Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. To learn more about this program, just visit our website, excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. Let's return to the conversation. Rachel shares what parents can do to assist girls in developing a healthy self-esteem.
First of all, encourage them on a daily basis. as a parent myself, I find that it's very easy to be surrounded by saying no a lot. You're constantly throughout the day, no, you can't do that. No, don't get into that. No, don't do that. I don't want you making that decision. Think about your decisions. And so many times we say no to our children more than we say yes. So for every time you say no about something, find some other way to positively reinforce your child. And, and not in ways that are physical. Not, oh, you look beautiful today. I love your hair. That's great. Yeah, that's nice to tell them that. But when you encourage them for things who they are. That was a great deed you did today. That was beautiful. I'm really proud of you for that.
Now, even though you grew up in a Christian home and you didn't realize that a lot of these issues were underneath where you're concerned until you came out of your shell and you started modeling, do you think that your parents could have done anything any differently that would have changed your outcome in terms of the road you took? Would anything have made a difference?
Honestly, they did everything. Well, I'd say they do everything right. I mean, they raised me to love the Lord. I did Bible studies. I have 3 younger sisters. I'd bring them into my room and I'd teach them Bible study. And we really enjoyed seeking after the Lord. This was a pure rebellion thing. The only thing that I ever remember that stuck with me is when they'd tell me, well, don't wear those clothes. Well, why not? Because they're not good. And there was no real definition. So I would encourage parents to explain to your children why, because I never knew the effect that my clothes had. I remember specifically my argument would always be, it's not my fault if guys can't control themselves. Explain to your daughters that there really is limits that they need to set, because while sometimes a lot of guys want to control themselves, there really are things that they can't control. And as girls, we need to protect ourselves and protect the men around us by dressing in ways that are appropriate and still, you can still be very fashionable, but still cover yourself.
So that would help, that kind of teaching to the young girls.
Absolutely.
Because even then you had no idea that men are visual, that boys are visual.
Very visual, to the point where they really can't control their emotions to a degree. And I use the illustration of my wedding ring a lot. I think my wedding ring is gorgeous. It's a symbol of love, so it's very special. But at the same time, I love the diamond in it. It's quite beautiful. I would never take my ring off and just set it on my mailbox and just leave it out there saying, well, it's not my fault if they steal it. Because it kind of would be my fault. While it's not my fault that they have the urge to steal, it's my fault for leaving it unguarded. And the same thing is true of yourself. When you leave yourself unguarded, it's not your fault if they can't necessarily control themselves, but it is your fault for leaving it out there on display.
Talk about Priceless Virtue. This is a ministry that you started. How did you come up with the name?
There are so many people out there right now that are pushing purity, and purity is such a good topic. And so in my heart, I love purity, but there's more to this message that I wanted to bring than simple purity. And it was an overall lifestyle of integrity. And it came down to virtue. And I came down to Philippians 4:8 and the things that are pure and right. And that verse specifically lines out every single thing that this is what I want my ministry to be about, virtue. And you can't put a price tag on it. So it became, kind of a play off of my name with Rachel Price, Priceless Virtue. But at the same time, it was really truly sending that message to young girls that your virtue, your integrity, your purity is priceless. Don't let anyone ever try to put a price on that for you.
We are constantly telling young girls, just say no. And some of them will wear, the rings where they pledge to remain pure until marriage.
Absolutely.
Is that message enough?
It's a good message to send, and all girls need to hear that message. But I like to include more than that, because purity is so much more than just a sexual purity. If we draw the line, if we wait until that point to draw the line, that's why it's often so hard to stop right there. That's like trying to push the brakes on a car that's going 80 miles an hour right at the stoplight. And you need to set your boundaries a little further back. I talk to girls a lot about flirting, that we often ask how far is too far sexually, but we never think about how far is too far with flirting and with other actions. we have to consider that our actions cause responses in other people. And so we need to stop before we do our actions, whether it be flirting, whether it be hand-holding, or with your boyfriend, you get to kissing and one thing leads to another. Stop and consider, why are you doing what you're doing, and what kind of response is this making? Not just for me, but for him. How is this going to affect it? Is it going to be too hard for him to put the brakes on at this point?
What are some strategies for young girls if they are approached by a guy that they're dating who wants to progress to the next level? How should she handle that?
I always recommend, first of all, group dating for girls, just as a consistent rule. I know a lot of girls I've had come and talk to me, well, what about the third date rule? You know, we're expected to have sex on the third date. And, you know, if that's the kind of guy you're dating, you need to get out of the relationship, first of all, because you want to make sure that you're going to date a guy who knows your worth. And if he knows your worth, he's not going to pressure you. So, first of all, recognize what you want in a man and set those boundaries, or set that limit high so that you're not going to settle for anything less. Make sure you have a man who knows what you're worth and isn't going to try to get you to do things before you're married, because he wants to wait because he knows how special and valuable you are. So make sure you have that. But to avoid the temptation, go on group dates. Don't find yourself alone in a theater or alone in your bedroom or your apartment, places where temptation is going to be very, very hard to resist. So stay out in public. If you're going out for lunch, you know, make sure it's at a nice public area where there's a lot of people around and you're not going to be tempted to do things.
And what response do you get from the girls when you tell them these rules?
I get mixed responses a lot, absolutely. The group thing for them is, you know, if they have enough girlfriends that are also going out, it's a fun thing, because then you can sometimes they'll still go to the movies. I say avoid the horror movies, avoid any of those where you're going to want to cuddle up, but go in a group so you have a bunch of people who can be there to take the edge off. And if you make it a fun enough thing, they can enjoy it. But oftentimes they say, well, I just want to be one-on-one with him. And if that's the case, then maybe go to lunch at a pizza place where you're going to have a lot of people around and you're not going to be able to sit there and make out in the booth in front of everybody.
What impact do you think media are having on our generation of girls when there's so many images out there encouraging them to dress sexy, but also the sense of even some of their teen idols that they're all involved sexually?
That sets a standard that's what they need to do. That's what, because even when I first began coming out of my shell and trying to make friends, that's how I would base myself is, well, I'd see on TV shows, this is what they're doing and they're really popular, so that's what I need to do. And I would act that way. And whether I knew why I was having those actions or not, that's what I did, because that's what they did. And so I think a lot of girls often model their behavior off of what they're seeing.
Even girls who are growing up in Christian homes.
Absolutely. Now, because I grew up in a Christian home, and I thought if I didn't, I'd be awkward. I'd be the oddball out. So I would specifically act like these people so I could be the cool one. I could fit in. And that led me down a path of, I didn't know why I was flirting. I just knew I didn't even necessarily know I was flirting. I just knew that I saw the girls on TV acting with guys and being silly and goofing off like they were. And so that's what I did.
So how can the church and how can parents combat this, since these images are so strong? And not only that, you know, kids are getting these images on their own cell phones. You know, they've got their own Facebook accounts. There's now sexting. So how can the church fight this battle and win it?
That's a really hard one. For parents specifically, I strongly recommend always monitoring your child's accounts, you know, with Facebook and Twitter, and now with the great new Snapchat, you know, keep an eye on what your kids are sending back and forth, and so that you can be a part of it. Don't make it so much like you're trying to overlord them, but be a part of their life and make sure that you can enjoy the social media with them and use it as a tool for your advantage. Instead of allowing them to have time in their bedroom alone at night surfing the web, make sure that it's something that they're doing right there with you. A lot of times I recommend that parents have kids leave their cell phones in the kitchen at night to charge, so you know they're not in their bedroom looking at sites where they might be tempted to look at things. And it's just a good way to kind of monitor them. And for the church, I recommend that I always find it good that the church encourage the parents in this way too.
You mentioned early on that you experienced date rape. How did you bring about your own healing in your life from that experience?
It took me a long time to even admit that ever happened. That's the biggest part. And even to this day, I think there's people in my family who still don't even know the story of what happened because it leaves you feeling so shameful. Like, I should have done something different and it wouldn't have happened. Or I'm a bad person because it happened. And that was, for me, that was what it was. I never talked about it because I thought, wow, that's just one strike against me. But it's not. And that's what I want girls to recognize is, while yes, there's ways we can dress to protect the men around us from stumbling, there are some men who just don't have the control. And that part is not your fault. Don't ever let it think that you're a bad person because of what someone else did to you.
Thank you so much. And I just pray for even greater success in what you do, because this message needs to get out for us to show the love and care for our teen girls so they can grow up to be women of priceless virtue.
Thank you so much.
Our guest on Excellent Living today, Rachel Price, the founder of Priceless Virtue, an organization committed to helping girls find their true value and worth in knowing they are created in the image of Christ. You can learn more about Rachel and available resources when you visit her website, pricelessvirtue.com. We encourage you to buy a CD of this interview for your youth group or for you to listen to again with your teenagers. It's a great resource for countering the messages they're getting in the culture. I'm Doris McMillan, reminding you that excellent living is doing life God's way because it's the best way, and His way is perfect.